Instead, we have the opportunity to make a habit of empathy, to recognize ourselves and each other.
It's like hopeful that people could grow up in a culture of empathy, because I think it's sort of natural, and we've kind of unlearned or learned something else. And so I think for those people who've got such deep habits kind of formed, some skill development can be useful. And you know, building awareness of things that aren't empathy can sometimes help. Like, so we often, when we share something with someone, we'll get back advice or a story it reminds them of, or you know, questions, or these things that aren't as connecting. If you need empathy, they can be connecting, but if you really want empathy, they're not so connecting. And so I think even catching ourselves, bringing the awareness to ourselves and catching ourselves in things that aren't it can be helpful also. But then just practicing staying with a person, and just with that last. So it's sort of a practice of having more awareness about what your mind is doing, because our minds are made kind of, or wired kind of, to attach to things and make sense of things and trying to organize things. And so oftentimes, you know, we'll hear something and we have a good idea for that person, or I know just what that's like because it happened to me, and so I want to help, you know, because we all do want to help. And yet that brings the focus off of the person, out of presence with the person. So all those kinds of practices or awarenesses of what the mind has a tendency to do, or that we have habits of doing, a practice of like illuminating them and then noticing them, I think would be helpful for those people who already learned different ways of being. But I think with kids, if they're actually grow up in a family or community or in a world, then they have less kind of unlearning to do, and it will just be more organic, I imagine.
So one is kind of developing skills, kind of a set of skills that you can teach, and the other is that we need a culture of empathy, but we kind of have to get from here to there.
Yeah.
Kind of is the
and
using skills to just kind of teach it. Is
yeah.
that right?
And I think we're growing in that way. I think just evolutionarily, and maybe it's almost like a spiritual kind of thing. People have been working on more on an individual basis and have gotten to some really amazing places in their spiritual evolution. But in terms of systems that are in place, I think we're kind of new evolutionarily, like that once we bring these people who can give empathy and stuff all together, then you know, stuff happens. And you know, to have kind of a solid structure is something that's growing, and I imagine, well, I mean, I know of some processes that can help with that culture of empathy. You know, I know restorative justice circles are one where so when things do fall apart, there's a kind of structure and something that people kind of buy into, agree is helpful, to fall back on, to reconnect, so that when trust breaks down, trust can be rebuilt. So those kinds of systems, I think in some ways are new maybe to our culture. I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means, but I do have a sense that we're kind of in the baby stages of systems that support empathy. Yeah.
So changing the topic a little bit, if you look at the kind of the narrative of your life, when you grew up, did you feel a lot of empathy, or did you kind of like, you know, learn something about empathy kind of growing along? Just wonder what the story is.
Like when I look back, I think I did. I think I had I had some place of wanting, like an intention of empathy, but I don't think I knew what it was, so it may have been more like sympathy or my heart going out. I definitely have experiences of, like, you know, worrying about, you know, the kind of the underdog or somebody who's, you know, in a minority or.
So as a child, you had some experiences where you saw that, and
yeah, and I saw my pull to wanting to protect and.
when did that happen?
Well, my very first memory, I actually remember it. Should I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. Is a neighborhood girl who was, I think, between my older sister and my age, would sometimes offer to buy one of us an ice cream and not the other one. And so my first memory is of having bought me an ice cream. And I think I went into the closet and was eating it, and had this horrible feeling of like betrayal of my sister, or like it was horrible, like it was shameful. It was like almost like the ice cream wasn't even good, you know. It was like, if my sister can't enjoy it too, but I really wanted it, you know, like it was this like, but it was not a pleasant experience, and that's like something that really stuck with me, is like, oh, this is not, you know, fun. It's not. I feel for my sister, you know. Yeah.
That was kind of an empathy that you thought you weren't quite empathizing with her, putting yourself in her shoes.
Yeah, maybe there was a little. Yeah.
Okay, that's a cute story.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely also remember a lot of stuff around race when I was a young child, and being really sensitive to anything that I thought was racist. That it was like, you know, I saw Roots as a young child, and it was like horrific, and I think I just got, again, kind of protective. So.
And how does that relate to empathy? What do you think is the connection there?
I think the connection is that there's something in my heart that wanted to go out and be present with people, but I actually didn't know how to do it. So it wasn't empathy, because it was about me and my pain around it, I think. But it's something that I think the same maybe pull, or if I had known how, like, empathy would have been, you know, something I could have.
The way. Like you wanted to connect with people.
Yeah.
You didn't know how.
Yeah.
It was like empathy would have maybe helped.
Yeah, and even empathy with myself, like to connect with what was going on for me. Yeah.
See the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.